Hello, everyone. Welcome to class again here, another edition of the Peaceful Solution Teacher Certification course. If you're standing, you can be seated. We're going to be picking up, actually, we're in lesson 6, or chapter 6, I Can Make a Difference, and we're going to be picking up where the last teacher left off. But first, we're going to go back to LP6C. Actually D, LP6D, and we're going to look at step 6 and refresh our minds on what we're doing, where I believe it was Chris left off last time. And it says, explain to students that just like a political or community leader, their character will also define how they lead others. Have students read the sections entitled Be a Positive Leader on pages 131 and 132, and What Leadership is Not on page 133. And if you're tuning in over the internet, on Facebook, you can download this book, this manual, the Peaceful Solution Character Manual, and follow along with us. It's at the top of the page. You just click on the link and download the book. And we welcome everyone that is tuning in from afar. We're glad that you two are choosing peace and learning the way to teach it. So we just went over step 6, and then it says, then allow students to read the scenarios and answer the question on page 134. So let's go over to page 131. That's where Chris left off last time. And he went over the first 3 steps on being a positive leader, okay? And I wanted to kind of quickly review the ones he went over just to get them in our mind again. It says all positive leaders share specific qualities and skills. And how many of these character traits and skills do you have, or do we have? And we, in order to become a positive, effective teacher, we really need to be honest with ourselves when we look at these, because none of us are perfect teachers at this time. Okay, we're all learning still. I know I have a lot of things I need to work on as a teacher. And all of us, and even not just in teaching a class, but also in our walk, in our example that we portray to other people on a daily basis. But it says, number 1, positive leaders lead by example. And that's really the most important. That's probably why it's at the top. And it says, that's right. First, you must walk the walk and talk the talk before you tell someone else what to do. Now, does that mean that you have to be perfect to start teaching? No, I just told you, none of us are perfect, right? But you have to have the willingness, the desire, the information, the knowledge. You have to be willing, humble, willing to learn. Okay? So, none of us that started teaching the Peaceful Solution were perfect examples of practicing the Peaceful Solution in our lives, because we're all still students. We're all still, becoming better people. But we have to have that willingness. And we have to be humble. We have to be willing to accept correction. And if we do make a mistake, if we do make a bad choice, we need to be willing to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep going. So you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. For example, remembering to practice self-control by not touching another's belongings without permission can show your peers by example how to practice self-control as well. And that's a tough one. I think all of us sometimes put our hands on something and we pick it up and we're like, oh, I didn't ask first. Okay, we can all fall into that if we're not careful about all of our actions. So, but we have to be, again, if we do something like that, we have to be humble enough to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, forgive me for doing that. Number 2, positive leaders are respectful, and they're respectful to authorities, to their peers, and to themselves. Beware of someone who's in a position of leadership and is disrespectful to his parents, teachers, or any form of authority, any other form of authority. And then number 3, it said positive leaders are responsible for their actions. The characteristic of being responsible is a combination of following through on your task and being responsible for your actions. It also includes not blaming others for your mistakes, but learning from them. Okay, and that's very important too, not to be scapegoating your followers and saying, well, it's their fault for what I did. As a leader, we should be responsible. If we're leading, we're responsible for where our followers end up. Okay, now that doesn't necessarily mean that, people that you teach are going to do everything you say. And it's not necessarily your fault that they don't, but we have to make sure, we have to look in the mirror and make sure that, we're walking the walk, we're talking the talk, we're doing what's necessary, and we're not the one that's setting the wrong example for them. And that's why they're making the choices they're making, because they see us doing things that we shouldn't be doing. So, but also remember, be responsible for your actions, being responsible, being accountable. That's a positive character trait that we learned on page 17, page 88, and on page 125, if you want to mark that down about where you can find responsible. So we're going to pick up here on point 4. That's where Chris left off last time. So positive leaders are compassionate. All right, let's go ahead and read the rest. Effective leaders care about others in the same way they care about themselves. They take the time to alleviate suffering wherever they can. And that suffering could be mental, it could be physical, any type of suffering. We should be willing, to help if we see someone that is suffering in some way. And, this whole world is suffering right now from lack of moral character education, Think of all the ills that the world is suffering, and it all goes back to one thing. It's the lack of positive moral character education. Everything stems from character, okay? Our choices that the world is making, each individual is making, stems from either a positive character or a negative character, okay? Everything starts with our thoughts, actions, choices, etc. Okay, so compassionate. Let's look at page 29 real quick and refresh our mind on what that word compassionate means. Page 29. It's the second one where it says, to care about the needs of others. If you see that someone feels down or sad, you care enough to try and help. For example, your friend lost her wallet. You forego your plans and you help her look for it. Okay? Now, granted, if you lose your wallet or you lose your purse or something like that, you might not be physically suffering, although, there could be some physical things that you feel in your body when you're feeling very anxious or worried about something, right? There's physical changes that take place in your body, but for the most part, in this situation, the suffering would be mental. Man, I lost my wallet, all my IDs in there. There's a lot, that somebody could be going through because of the loss of an item. If we're compassionate, we would put aside what we need to do for the moment and possibly try to help them, find that wallet. And that's just a small example of what we can do to be compassionate or show care about other people's needs. That's also part of not being selfish. Selfishness is something we need to get out too. We need to make sure that we're not just thinking about ourselves, but looking out for the interests of other people. Being considerate, considering what they're going through, considering what they might be feeling, putting yourself in their shoes and using empathy, as some of the other teachers brought out about that word empathy and how it's just simply put yourself in that person's position and imagine how you would feel if you were going through a similar situation, okay? There's a lot of, if you think about it, there's a lot of character traits, a lot of positive character traits that are put into play in any one event. There's many character traits that you're actually either practicing or not practicing in any given event. Okay, so let's go back now to page 131, now that we went over the word compassionate. So let's see. Let's look at number 5. Positive leaders are diligent and steadfast. In other words, they don't give up just because things might get difficult. If something is worth pursuing, it's worth pursuing with all your might. Now, it says if something is worth pursuing. You know, there's a lot of things that people are pursuing right now that aren't worth pursuing, okay, that lead to a lot of trouble. But if it's something that's positive, if it's a positive goal that you've set for yourself, then you should do it. We should do it with all of our might, all of our strength, you know, putting all of our energy into it. For example, a leader might think something that seems impossible might just take a little longer to do. Okay? Now, remember, we've been talking about how impossible it would seem to the average person. That's not talking about us, because if we didn't think we could make a difference in the world, again, we wouldn't be sitting here. But it seems like an insurmountable task to try to teach the world moral character when it's not being taught at this time. And there's only, we have groups spread throughout the earth right now. Many of them are tuning in right now, tuning in to become, certified teachers. But it's a very small amount of people compared to, the 8 billion or so people we have on this planet right now. So it seems like a giant task, and it is, but it can be done. All revolutions always began with a single person, a single thought. Now, I'm not talking about wars when I say revolution. The word revolution means to turn around, to turn something around. And there's been many things that have been turned around by a single individual, and just their idea, they thought about it, and they put that thought into action, and they got other people behind them. And guess what? Gandhi was a great example. I think David, a couple classes ago, he talked about Mahatma Gandhi, and I thought, I watched that movie probably about 7 or 8 times back when I was growing up, or, when I was, that must have been, 1980, early 80s, when that came out. I was in high school. But I admired that man. He was in India. He was studying to be a lawyer. He was very young. And I remember he was sitting on a train. This is what turned his life around. It turned his goals around. He was studying to be a lawyer, and he was sitting on a train in his own country, which the British had taken over. And I remember they told him he had to sit at the back of the train. And he's like, why? I'm an Indian citizen. Why do I have to sit at the back? And they said, don't ask questions, just get to the back. And they pretty much picked him up and threw him off the train because he wouldn't go to the back. And that set him on a path to making a change in his country, because he saw that, it wasn't fair that he was an Indian citizen and the British were treating them like second-class citizens. But he didn't do it. He didn't make that change. He didn't cause that revolution by violence. In fact, whenever his followers, and there was violence that took place, but it wasn't Gandhi that promoted it, and it wasn't him that was urging his followers to do it. It's just that they hadn't been trained in the peaceful solution themselves, so they just kind of resorted to whatever came to mind or whatever they felt like doing, because, they weren't controlling their emotions. But whenever his followers would start to use force, guns, knives, etc., to try to, force the British, or get rid of the British out of their country, Gandhi would start to fast. He wouldn't eat any food. And he would say, I'm not going to eat any more food until you stop hurting people, until you stop killing people and using weapons. Don't do that. That's not the way to bring peace. That's not the way to achieve our goal through force. He said we need to be peaceful about it. And you know what? That one little man with that one little idea, within just a few short years, the British left India and he became the first prime minister of India. But as David indicated, and he never harmed a person. He never lifted a finger to anybody. But you know what? He was murdered. Okay? And And I think David even mentioned that, just because you're promoting peace, does that mean the world's going to love you? No, it doesn't. Many, many people have been murdered that promoted the same principles that the peaceful solution is teaching right now. Okay? But those people that committed those crimes, that murdered the person that was promoting peace, they hadn't been taught the peaceful solution. So they didn't know that that's not the way to solve your problems, or that's not the way to get your point across, or if you disagree with someone, that's not the way you handle things. Okay? So I just thought he was a very great, he's probably one of the best examples, the closest example I've seen to the peaceful solution being put into practice to its fullest. Yeah, he had some flaws, but he didn't use violence, and he achieved a very huge, monumental task. If you think about it, the British were the most powerful nation on earth at that time. But yet he was able, the British left his country, and again, they got their country back. Very interesting. Okay, so I was on let's go to number 6. Positive leaders are decisive. Oh, by the way, that word diligent, I got to go back. Diligent is characterized by steady, earnest, and energetic effort. Okay? It means you put a lot of energy into it, earnestness, like a lot of zeal. Okay? Not only zealous in the physical aspects of getting the work done, but also in your mind. Being on fire for your idea. And in the peaceful solution, are we selling a vacuum cleaner? I mean, if you were selling a vacuum cleaner, you wouldn't be very sure about that product, unless you made the product and you were the creator of that product. You probably wouldn't put as much zeal, and you might not be too what they would call sure about your product. But in the peaceful solution, you can be sure about this product. It works. Okay? If people use it, if we use it, it works. There's no doubt about it. It's 100% guarantee. And you don't get your money back because you never gave any money. So, but it's a guarantee. Okay, it's guaranteed to work. You just have to use it. You have to put it into practice. But this diligent and steadfast. Remember, steadfast on page 15 just meant not to give up what you set out to accomplish. And let's go to number 6. It says positive leaders are decisive. And that word decisive means able to come to a decision, make up your mind, and remain firm on that decision. Now it says positive leaders are decisive. Did you ever meet someone who could not make up his or her mind? Frustrating, isn't it? They're kind of waving back and forth. Like a ship being tossed to and fro on the waves of the sea, and you're like, what? What are you going to do? Sometimes we're that way, aren't we? We can't make up our mind. I saw a picture one time, and it had some lipstick and a brain, and it said, make up your mind. That sticks with me when I think of make up your mind. That's not saying putting lipstick on your brain or anything. I'm just saying make up your mind. Remain firm on what you decide to do. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't be going back and forth. Now, the only time you should not, let's say you decide to do something and you find out that what you decided to do wasn't a positive thing. Like you found out through education that, well, that's not the best choice I should have made. What do you think you should do? Just keep doing it? No, you should realize be humble enough to realize, all right, I made a mistake. That wasn't the right thing to do. And then change course. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong with knowing that we're on the wrong course and continuing on that course. Well, I gave my word I was going to do it, so we're going to go ahead and ram this ship anyway, even though I know that, my decision is going to destroy the whole ship. Here we go. No, you should make the choice, you can change your mind, or you can change the course if you know it's something you shouldn't be doing. But it says positive leaders make decisions and then follow through with the decisions they made, unless they learn it's the wrong way. Okay, now number 7. Now this one we might have to take a little bit more time with. Positive leaders are humble. The word humble. Let's go back to page 14 real quick. Page 14 in your manual. You know, in fairness to everybody out there, you young people in the junior high school, I know it's going to be confusing when you hear this because even the adults get confused. But we see the word pride or proud, you know, plastered everywhere in the public school system and in our cities. You know, I remember, as an example, in living in Laredo, Texas, I would drive by one of the local high schools, and it would say Bulldog Pride on the fence. Or, you know, I was driving through Zapata, Texas, and I saw on the city's water tower it said Hawk Pride. So we see the word pride everywhere. You know, pride, proud, be proud of your school, etc. So what you're about to hear is kind of going to go against what you've, and when you tell this to your students, teachers, you know, you're going to have to explain to them that sometimes adults use words and they really don't consider what the meaning is, or they really don't know. I mean, even in the schools, you'll see the word pride hanging on posters. And it's promoted as a positive thing when really it's a negative character trait. It's the opposite of being humble, as we're going to see here. And I think I said to go to page 14. So let's read 14, and then we'll discuss it a little bit. Humble is number 5 at the bottom. It says not being proud or arrogant. A humble person will not argue, dispute, or disobey set rules. For example, the bathroom rule is clean up after yourself when you use the bathroom. You don't like to clean the bathroom, but you obey. Okay, that's called being humble. That's called humility, which is another word you can use. But not being proud or arrogant, that's what we want to key in on, because pride is promoted as something positive in the school system. And it's not their fault. It's like, for instance, the people they buy these posters from, you know, that promote positive character traits like respect, responsibility, or honesty, etc. They've never been taught moral character themselves, so they kind of just go off certain definitions they might have seen somewhere about what that word pride is. But again, pride, an example of pride for you teachers, you'll see this in students at times, or parents, you'll see this in your children at times. An example of pride would be like you ask your child to clean up or you tell your child an instruction, or you correct your child in something they've done, and they'll sit there and they'll be looking at you like, duh. What do you think, I'm stupid? You know, roll their eyes and kind of look away. That's pride, because pride is where, you know, you lift yourself up above someone else, or you don't accept the correction that you're receiving. You want to argue or dispute with the teacher, the authority, or parent, or whoever it might be. That's pride. You know, pride is something you can actually feel physically too. You know, when you become proud about something, you can feel like if somebody says something to you, if they correct you about a decision you made, you can actually sometimes feel like this swelling up, this puffing up in your chest, and it goes to your throat. You ever felt that when you got corrected? Because sometimes we don't get corrected the way we want either. You know, we don't really want people to correct us harshly or use a mean tone of voice or something, but sometimes they do. And you get that feeling inside like you just want to say something to them. You want to let them know how you feel right now, right there. Well, that's called pride. And it's being puffed up with pride. You just want to say something, and you want to do something to let that person know you don't like it. But that's a negative. That's the opposite of humble. Remember, a humble person will not argue. Of course, in the public school system, you're taught to argue. You go to debate class, right? And you can debate. You're taught to debate. You're taught when we've gone to many schools where they actually had us go in the gym and to wait for a class to get, for a class that we were going to teach. They said, well, the class is in the gym right now. You're going to have to go in the gym. And we had to go in the gym and wait for the students, and they were in there doing their war cries before the game that night, And those songs they were singing about that football game that was coming up, they were singing about, how they were going to beat that other team, and they were better than that other team, and we're going to cream them, and, this and that. And it was actually, that they call it a war cry there's a reason why they call it that. Okay? Because they look at this football game that's coming up as a war. Because it's rivalry. It's a rivalry between schools, which, again, is part of arguing or disputing, fighting, striving against people, thinking you're better than someone else. Again, that's pride. And we don't do it again, people don't mean to do it. But, you drive down the street and you see a bumper sticker on a parent's car. It says, proud parent of a Jones Middle School honor roll student, or my child's an asset at Jones Elementary School. Well, so what are you saying? All the other children are liabilities? I mean, my child's better than everybody else? Just because, hey, let me ask you a question. Just because a child excels in math or reading or social studies, does that mean they'll clean their room when you ask them to? Does that mean they won't steal $1 out of your purse? No, it just tells you that they're great at a skill. What's a skill? Is that character or personality? It's personality, right? But that doesn't tell you anything about their character. Now, it could tell you that they're pretty diligent in their studies, or that they're responsible and they do their homework, right? So the character does play into it, but don't take skills as an indication of a person's positive character or negative character. You can't tell that. You can only tell that by their actions and how they treat the authorities over them. But remember, a humble person doesn't argue, dispute, or disobey the rules, even if they don't agree with a rule. And we all see rules sometimes, and we kind of wonder, like, okay, well, I wonder what that rule's for. But that's neither here nor there. What we need to do is obey the rule, okay? Because if we obey it, eventually we'll come to understand it, okay? We'll come to understand it. There was many times we as children saw rules and we thought, man, what are these rules for? Why do I have to do this, or why do I have to do that? But now that you're an adult, can you see clearly why we had those rules? Of course you can. But it took time, it took growth, it took education, and eventually we started to understand why these things took place. So let's go back to where we left off. It was page 131. Okay, so 7, positive leaders are humble. So even when they are the ones who make the rules, such leaders show by example that they too are steadfast in keeping them. Have you ever heard someone say, well, I'm above the rules. I made that rule. I made that rule. I made that rule for you to keep. I don't have to keep it. I'm the one that made it. No. If we're going to make the rules, we need to be willing to follow the rules too. Okay? That's not a positive leader that makes rules, but then, only their followers have to keep them. They don't. That's not being a positive leader. They also, because remember, the only way your followers are going to be able to keep that rule is if they see you keeping it, so they see the example, right? They also listen to concerns or advice on which to base decisions. And I look at the presidents of the United States and I see their cabinet meetings they have sometimes, and there's many, many people around that table. And that president, you know what? He could just say, you know what? I'm the president. I'm making the decision. I don't have to listen to any of you guys. Get out of here. You're wasting my time. He doesn't do that. They listen to advice because wise leaders have counselors, then they listen to that advice because they don't know everything about any subject. Think about some of the things that a president has to deal with, like economics, economic situations, situations regarding national security. There's so many different things that they have to deal with that they might not come in there knowing everything about. Nobody knows everything about anything. So it's wise to have the counselors around them to get different people's outlooks, different information that you might not have. So they listen to the concerns or advice on which to base those decisions. And that's a positive character trait. Now, number 8 says that positive leaders are assertive. Let's go back to LP6A real quick and look at that word assertive because it was used there. I think I covered it a few classes ago. LP6A, where it talks about the note to the teacher. And I'm going to start at the top there. It says, in this chapter, students will learn that given the right motivation, encouragement, and skills, they have the potential to be leaders. In fact, you've been teaching them how to be positive, effective leaders from the first chapter of this unit. It is vital that students understand that leadership is an integral part of developing and maintaining a positive moral character. Children who are assertive, courageous, and have strong moral values are better able to deal with negative peer pressure and avoid risk-taking behaviors. These children are prepared to take a stand for what's right, even if they must stand alone, which that's being courageous. But that word assertive, remember, it meant being confident and being able to stand up for your rights or someone else's rights without overreaching, without like not controlling your emotions or not controlling your behavior, but in a calm, positive way. Okay? That's being assertive. To some people, being assertive is being a bully or pushing their way into something or being, it's more aggressive than assertive. Okay? There's a difference. So without being aggressive or passively accepting wrong, in other words, don't compromise your moral character when you're being assertive, when you're being calm and trying to reason with someone or trying to find a peaceful solution to a problem. Don't compromise your moral character. But stand up for what's right in a calm, positive way. Don't be moved by your emotions in any way, right? Don't base your decisions on your emotions, how you feel. Base them on the facts that you've learned from the peaceful solution. You already know that retaliation, getting even, raising your voice, hitting somebody, lashing out with your tongue, none of those things are ever going to work to bring peace. They're never going to bring a peaceful resolution to anything. They never have, they never will. 2 wrongs will never make a right. I know Chris covered that before about the author, how his parents, he heard in his hearing as a young child, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And if he had never heard that, from his parents, he might not have ever considered that. You can't consider something you didn't hear, right? I've talked to many children that have not been told that. I've talked to a lot of children that have been told, no, boy, if you don't hit that person back that hit you, don't come home for supper because you're not my boy. I didn't raise no wimp. Some children are told that. I think I told you before, didn't I, that I used to tell children, do everything your parents say, don't ever question it. Until I found these things out. I was telling a group of children at a Boys and Girls Club one time, obey your parents and everything. Don't ever, don't disobey them in anything they tell you to do. And then I found out some of the parents were telling them to do things to strike back at the bully or get even and things like that. And then I had to backtrack a little bit and tell them, well, look, you do need to obey your parents, but if they're asking you to do something that's illegal or it's going to bring harm to somebody or it goes against what you're learning in the peaceful solution, you have a right to respectfully say, no, I can't do that. You know, I don't want to do that. Should I do that, Mom? Should I do that, Dad? Because it says that if I do that, I could have some kind of consequence. Should I really do that? You have the right to question that if you're a young person. Okay? So remember, you know, two wrongs are never going to make a right. Going against the things we're learning in the peaceful solution is not the answer. Okay, let's go back to page 132. So positive leaders are assertive, number 8. In other words, a positive leader must be courageous and respectfully use his positive character to guide others in the right directions, maintaining his stance amidst opposition. Okay? In other words, not being moved, not being swayed one way or another, but standing firm. If we know it's a positive thing that we're doing, don't we already know if we have a positive goal that we're going to receive opposition? Don't we? As a leader, shouldn't we be ready for opposition, for something to try to keep us from getting to our goal, reaching our goal? Of course we should. It's not realistic to set goals and think you're not going to have any it's all going to be smooth sailing, right? No way. You can expect opposition. You can expect pitfalls and curveballs. Curveballs and pitfalls, I think. Excuse me. You can expect that. Remember, we learned about that in this class. You can expect it. Be ready for it. Be ready for it. Just like we teach children to be ready to be disrespected every day. Be ready. You know, be ready because people aren't all taught to practice a peaceful solution. So you're probably going to be disrespected, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. Whether it's real or whether it's imagined, you're going to be disrespected. And the average, junior high children, you're disrespected at average of 214 times a week. That's a lot of disrespect going on. So you have to be ready for it. In other words, you don't walk around with a chip on your shoulder. All right, I'm ready. Who's going to disrespect me? I'm going to knock your lights out. No, that's not how you do it. You just realize that, hey, someone's probably going to say something I don't like, or they're probably going to try to push my buttons intentionally, or they might step on the back of my shoe unintentionally when we're walking down the hall at school or something like that, right? You got to be ready for it, but you have to be ready by setting your mind, all right, here's what I'm going to do if somebody steps on the back of my shoe. I'm not going to just jump to conclusions and assume they did it purposely, right? You have to set your mind. You have to think about, okay, the next time so-and-so does this or somebody does this, how am I going to act? What am I going to say? What am I going to do? And then follow through on your plan. Follow through on your plan. Okay, let's see. Number 9, positive leaders have confidence. A positive leader must be confident in the guidance he's leading others with. He must be certain at all times that it's based on moral character that will bring benefit to all. Don't confuse confidence with pride. Confidence is not, it's not, when you stand on positive moral character, you're not being prideful, you're just being confident because you know this isn't a vacuum cleaner, this is the peaceful solution, and it works. These are proven methods that work every time if they're put into practice the correct way, if we follow the instructions that we've been given. But we have to be certain that the choices that we're making as a leader are based on moral character. And the only way we can know if they're based on moral character is to make sure we go back and look at what we've been instructed in. Okay? Don't assume something is right. You know, don't assume it. Be certain. And if you're certain about something and you have that confidence, I've noticed in my life that people that aren't certain about a certain thing they believe or they profess to believe, if they're not certain about it and somebody challenges them about their belief, boy, they get really upset. They start raising their voice and they get all agitated and, right? But a person that firmly believes in something, they really believe in something, they don't get agitated. They don't raise their voice. They don't sit there and argue with somebody or dispute with them. They're confident because they know, hey, I'm standing on solid moral principles here that cannot be shaken. I'm like standing on a rock solid foundation, man. Nothing, the biggest hurricane or the biggest earthquake couldn't shake this, because these moral principles, they're proven. They work. You can have confidence if you're making the right choice, no matter what everybody else is saying, no matter all the people that are challenging you or coming against you, doesn't matter. We cannot compromise with immorality. We can't do something immoral and compromise our moral position. If we know we're right, stand on it. Stand on what's right. It says, he must be certain at all times it's based on moral character that will bring benefit to everyone. And that's a key right there, that it benefits everyone, not just their self. Number 10, positive leaders use all their positive character traits to motivate and encourage others. Now, when you interact with others as a person with integrity, you encourage others to do the same. Negative leaders often use fear and intimidation to motivate their followers to choose a specific course of action. Eventually, negative leadership will lead to resentment and even violence. And that's what we see now. Understand this, it's very, very simple if you think about it. Why, let's say there's a revolution in a country and a certain group of people say, hey, we're being treated unfairly. We're going to take over the government. And we're going to throw these people out and we're going to take over, right? So then they take over, and then, after a while, what takes place? Well, because they didn't have negative leadership qualities to begin with, because they chose violence to overthrow the other guys, so that already told you there was something wrong with them, right? So should you use violence to get your way? Should you use force? No. Remember Gandhi? Remember that example? He never raised a finger. But yet the British troops left his country and he became the prime minister. He never hurt anybody. Okay, so if a group of people take over a government by force, what do you think eventually other groups are going to think about that group that took over? Well, they're going to think, hey, we don't like the way they're treating us. And they're going to come and they're going to do the same thing to them that was done to the last group of people. Okay? So what's that going to lead to? Is anything going to change? No, it's just going to lead to more resentment, more violence, and another overthrow, and another new government comes in, and then someone else comes behind them, doesn't like what they're doing, they come in, they overthrow them, and it's just an endless cycle. Okay? It doesn't work. Okay, so it says, eventually negative leadership leads to resentment and even violence, so be positive and display a positive attitude. The results will be greater than you can imagine. What the world hasn't seen yet is leaders that have been taught the peaceful solution all working together to bring about, peaceful resolution to all their problems, whether they're financial, whether they're, problems that are between nations, difficulties they're having with each other. People have not seen that yet. They've seen little glimpses of it, but they haven't seen it yet. And that's why a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouths about government. There's nothing wrong with government. We need government. I remember back in, I think, 2012, I believe it was 2012 or 2013, the Egyptians were, I think they were the Egyptian people, some of them, not all of them, but the Egyptian people were, what do they call that, instigated on Facebook, I think it was on Facebook, to overthrow the president named Mubarak from the country. And certain groups outside of Egypt wanted to see this guy removed. So they instigated through social media an uprising. And they threw out President Mubarak, and they threw him out. They were successful in throwing him out, but guess what? They were without a leader because no one came in to fill the vacuum. There was all this infighting between other people that wanted to take over power and this and that. So for quite a long time, they were without any kind of form of government. And guess what? I saw pictures of trash outside of the apartment complexes that were 6 stories up in the air. Well, why? Because there was no government. There was no city government. There was no infrastructure. Everything stopped. There was no trash pickup. There was no street cleaning. There was nothing. And I think some people quickly realized, wait a minute, we need government. We need to have a government. We need to have people operating here, or we're not going to get what we need. So you need government. Government, there's nothing wrong with government. But remember, governments are made up of people, right? Governments are people. So the government has to be made up of people that have been trained in positive moral character. If that's done, you would see a whole different way things are operating, and people would, for the first time, go, wow, government's not so bad after all. But that's our job. We got to train. We have to keep train ourselves first so we can teach other people what we've learned. And these leaders, they're part of that training too. They're going to be part of that training. Okay, so let's look. It says, when you develop positive moral character, you will motivate and encourage others with the same zeal and the best interests of all involved. Foremost in your mind, be guided by the true values of the Peaceful Solution Character Education program that you have learned. Foremost in your mind, you should have the Peaceful Solution, it says. Okay? Now, we've gone to different schools, and they've said, well, we're using this different character education program. We're using this program or whatever. And we said, you could supplement what you're using with the Peaceful Solution. You could add this to your curriculum. You could add it to whatever you're doing. Okay? And a lot of times they will do that, and they'll find out that this is actually the better program. This is the best program. But you don't force it. You don't force it on them. We just suggest to them that, hey, you might want to supplement this, because we already know we got the best product out there. Okay? So once other people see that the Peaceful Solution is, it works 100%, they too would get behind it. But you just have to get it in their hands however you can. Now, here's a few points to keep in mind, a few other points it says about, positive leadership. To be placed in a position of leadership is a great responsibility and should never be treated lightly. The measure of those who have a positive character and are great leaders is their ability to respect those who look to them for guidance. Remember, without followers, there are no leaders. So treat everyone with respect and consideration. Okay? Keep in mind that positive leaders will demonstrate their leadership skills even if they're not the leader of a club or a team. So remember, you don't have to be a leader of anything. You can lead others just by your example. And you are right now. You are doing it right now, whether you realize it or not, even sitting right here and you're at the table. You're leading someone right now, because other people, they might be sitting behind you and they're watching how you behave in class. They're watching whether you're paying attention, whether you're twiddling your thumbs, whether you're rolling your eyes and looking at the clock, or they're watching if you're sitting up straight, leaning forward, paying attention, being interested. People are watching. So you're being an example whether you want to or not, okay? You're being an example. Okay. Sorry, I lost my place. Okay. Keep in mind that, so it says, when you are a positive leader, you're confident that you can make decisions that will support your positive character and by example encourage others to do the same. You keep seeing that word example. It's very important. Example is very powerful. What we do, how we carry ourselves, how we behave in front of others. And not just in front of others, but when we're alone, We can't be one way out in front of everybody else and be different behind closed doors. It doesn't work that way. In fact, I don't know a teacher in the Peaceful Solution. I don't even know a student in the Peaceful Solution that even thinks that you can do that. because it would eventually come out. Whatever you're doing behind closed doors would come out. So let's look on page 133 and learn what leadership is not. And these are going to be really familiar because we see these all the time. Okay. So what leadership is not bossing people around. Okay. And I'm not saying everyone does it, because there are people out there that I've worked for that were very, very gentle, very kind, very patient. And they didn't have that arrogant attitude of, well, I own this company, or, I'm the boss. In fact, a lot of times, a lot of them that I dealt with, they gave me the keys to the business. They didn't question my coming and going. They were very, very, it was almost like they were handing over the business to me. And I was like very impressed by their humility, as a business owner. Okay. Now that wasn't something they just did, that was only because they saw positive character traits and they started to trust me in those areas. You should never trust someone without, getting to know them and know their character. You don't just hand your keys over to somebody, or invite someone to, somewhere without knowing who they are. But not bossing people around is important, not thinking that, hey, I'm the teacher, or I'm the boss, or I'm the authority here. Like sometimes you hear people say things like, don't do as I do as I say, I'm the boss, right? Number 2, leadership is not using fear or threatening people to do things. This is called being a bully, okay? And again, you see that a lot of times with world leaders, where, they're threatening to do things if the other country doesn't do what they want them to do. And if you are a leader, if you are a world leader and you're watching this program, just put this into practice. Just remember that using fear, people do things when they get afraid. In fact, I was just reading, there's a huge military buildup right now on pretty close to Russia. NATO troops and other troops, I believe U.S. troops, other troops are having war games. Very massive show of force, too. And it's right on a country's border. A country can get scared when they see there's a bunch of troops surrounding them. They could think there's something up. And fear can cause people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. And, I want you to imagine something right now. Imagine if Russia, Ukraine, and other countries in that area of the world came over to this side and started having war games, say, right out in the Pacific Ocean, or right out in the Atlantic Ocean, just a few miles off the coast. I don't think we'd appreciate that too much. I don't think the American government would appreciate that too much, because we would wonder, are they just there to play games, or are they going to attack us? So fear can be very, very dangerous. Okay, we shouldn't be wanting to put fear in anybody. And that's one of the reasons why they do these things, is to put fear in people. Look at our weapons, look at our ships, look what we have. And if you mess with us, this is what you got coming. But this isn't the way to do it. This isn't the way to find peace. This isn't going to lead to any kind of peaceful solution to any of our problems. It's going to make things worse, because when we put fear and we use intimidation tactics, it just leads to more negative choices. The other side decides, you know what, we're going to have some war games too, and we're going to show you that we're more powerful than you. And again, it's that pride, it's that arrogance, instead of the humility that we need. Okay? And you have to remember, there's nuclear weapons out there. I think one of the speakers talked about the nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are very devastating. They've only been used a couple times over in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and they did, and that was 70 plus years ago, 75 years ago, and they did some major damage. Okay, hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and even after that, after the initial blast, other people as well were continuing to die from the effects of radiation, and et cetera. And I think one of our congresswomen recently, Tulsi Gabbard, came out and she tried to reason with people and tell them, hey, y'all know, if you start a nuclear war, you don't understand what that's going to mean to this world, to the people, to the millions of people that are going to die, to the destruction that's going to take place. So there's some people that are using they're using some common sense. Okay, but these kind of tactics, using fear or threatening people to do things, it's being a bully. And eventually, what occurs to the bully? I'm not saying you do it, because we practice peace. We don't do anything. We try to teach the bully, not to be a bully. But eventually, aren't all bullies eventually brought down? So we don't want to be a bully. If you're a world leader and you're watching, be an example, be an example of practicing the peaceful solution and trying to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. De-escalate the situation. Don't escalate it by having war games and using words that are going to put fear, or using intimidation and threatening people. That doesn't work. And on a smaller scale, if you're a teacher or a parent or whatever else, the same thing applies to all of us. Bullying tactics, fear tactics, doesn't work. Teaching, education works, okay? Education and the peaceful solution works every time. I've seen it. It works. It's guaranteed. It's not a vacuum cleaner. You can be confident. You can be sure. You can be steadfast in your belief that the peaceful solution will bring peace, but this negative leadership will not bring peace. It'll always just bring the wrong results that we don't want, okay? And really, neither side's going to want that result. Even the bully is not going to like the result of the bullying that he's doing. Eventually, it's going to come back on his head, and it's not a great thing. So we want to keep it positive, okay? So my time is up. Let's see. Today's 5/9. Oh, okay. We're going to be 1 week from tonight. Anybody that's watching right now on the internet, please make note that this Wednesday we're going to be taking off for we're going to have a conference, intra student conference here in Abilene. So we won't be here Wednesday night, but next Sunday night we will. I believe, is it next Sunday night, or which day is it next Sunday night? Okay, yeah, next Sunday night we'll be picking back up, which will be the 16th, 5/16. Okay, so make a note. No class Wednesday night. We'll be picking up next Sunday night at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. So it's been a real pleasure. Yeah. Okay. So it's been a real pleasure, and we'll see you next class.